Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. What we have for you today is a modification that you can do to a Toyota 4Runner, a Toyota Tacoma, a Toyota FJ Cruiser, a Lexus GX, and then in the near future, it's also going to be offered for Toyota Tundras and for Toyota Land Cruisers. What the modification is an improvement over the OEM bump stops. This is an OEM rear bump stop, and this is one of two of the front bump stops on the front lower control arms. The properties of these bump stops is they are very rigid and hard with not much give. They're pretty much rock solid, so when they hit, you feel it. It jars you, especially in the rear. There's this guy that Sean and I met through toyota4runner.org. His handle on the forum is Plastics Guy. His name is Curtis, and he came up with a really nice design for a replacement for the rear bump stops and for a replacement for the front bump stops. They're called Durobumps. He offers them for stock height rigs, and he makes them for different variations of lifts. What is this guy Curtis's qualifications to be manufacturing this kind of stuff? Well, he is a raw materials consultant for companies that are in the plastics and rubber industry. He also has a rapid prototype company, which is basically 3D printing. So the way this product came about for Curtis is he wanted to improve on the design of the OEM bump stops. He came up with the 3D printing. He made the mold, and he had a rubber compound that he first tried, and he put them on his truck, and he was pleasantly surprised with how much better they performed with his first prototype. Then they went through some R&D, and they tried different compounds. He works with chemical formulator engineers that tweak the formula to where it's a nice progressive rubber that will eventually get firm. With the old bump stop, it would just, you'd hit and it'd be solid, a harsh hit. With his bump stops, because of the formulation of the rubber that they use, it's progressive. It gives, and then gets firm. And that's the huge benefit to these bump stops, is they actually allow some dampening in your rear end. So it's not a harsh hit if you're really hitting it hard off road. It dampens a little bit, and then it compresses all the way to where it firms up. So it's a much nicer feel. The same for the front end of the vehicle on the lower control arms. Guys have used these for a while now, and they're helping Curtis test these things out, and they're able to drive the same fire roads much faster with a lot more comfort in their vehicle, because this bump stop is allowing some shock absorption for the front control arm. The kit for the front control arms only comes with one bump stop per side. So what this one bump stop on the lower control arm is doing is it's slowing down the control arm and dampening it to where the front bump stop will contact, and it'll be a much smoother feel. So it's actually working like a shock absorber for the front control arm. This is one of the front bump stops on the lower control arm. Just like the rear, this is super hard. So when the control arm is hitting its max travel, this is slamming the frame, as opposed to when you use the Durobump front bump stop, you're actually getting some nice shock absorption. So that's the benefit. Just like the rear bump stops, this went through some R&D. Originally, this base plate was a resin-filled plastic, but guys really hitting the trails hard were able to crack it. So he now has the base plate as a 3/16 inch steel plate. There's other companies that make these. What makes his better? For the front, Wheelers Off-Road makes something similar to this, but their material is actually a dense foam. It's not a rubber. What people have found is after they do some hard four-wheeling, they've torn apart those Wheeler Off-Road bump stops. The Durobumps, on the other hand, are made of a progressive rubber, and they're a lot more durable and offer better dampening. So that's the benefit for the front bump stops. Same goes for the rear. The big benefit to the Durobumps over other competitors is the formulation of the rubber, the progressiveness of this bump stop as compared to others that are much more rigid. All right, let's go out to the rig and let's show you how to get these bump stops on. Following the instructions on the Durobump website, we have the rear end of Sean's truck jacked up so we can support the axle housing on 6-ton jack stands, and then we've got both the rear wheels off the truck. Like many people that have installed a suspension lift on their truck, Sean chose the route of having a bump stop extender rather than a whole longer bump stop. The reason why you have to extend the bump stop when you have a suspension lift is your shocks only have so much up travel. And if you didn't extend the bump stop when you do a suspension lift, you can damage your shocks by allowing the shaft to bottom out in the shock. This is really easy to remove. All you got to do is use a 12mm socket. I have a short extension with a 3/8 ratchet, and we're just gonna lefty-loosey and take this thing off. So there it is. The bump stop extender is off, the OEM bump stop, and then the long bolt that goes through that attaches it to the frame member here. Now this longer bolt is unique to Sean's rig based off of the extender that he used. He repurposed the frame extensions that you would get on an ARB bumper install, so that's what this is. So normally you wouldn't have a bolt this long. Before we get the Durobump rear bump stop connected, we're gonna clean up this surface. You can use brake cleaner, whatever you want to use. If you're one of those poor folks that live in the Rust Belt, maybe what you're doing is you're gonna be scraping off rust and painting it. So maybe that's an option. We're lucky, we live in the Bay Area. We don't have those issues. This is my 2000 4runner, and this is an example of what it would look like if you didn't have a rear lift and you had no need for extended bump stops. It's just the OEM bump stop without any type of extension to lower it down. This is my 98 4runner that I've done a lot of modifications on. I have a Sonoran steel lift, and with the lift came this style, which again is a big bracket extender with a Daystar bump stop. But am I gonna keep this on my rig? No, I'm gonna use the Durobumps because they are superior to this. So here's the rear bump stop kit. You got your 2 bump stops, you got your 2 bolts, and you have some Loctite that comes with it. They provide a 12mm head bolt, which is really cool because that's a standard size on our rigs, and it's also a very strong bolt. It's a 10.9 grade metric bolt. One of the other cool things that Durobumps provides is they provide thread locker. This is something most people that are do-it-yourselfers have, but it is pretty nice that he provides it, so if in case you didn't have it, it's right there in the kit ready to go. The first thing you got to do is get the bolt installed into the bump stop. I just have it resting on my 12mm deep socket. I'm going to go in from the bottom and then look from the top and see it go through just like so. Now we want to get some of that thread locker that was provided with the kit on the threads. You just twist this off like so. It's got a little twist top that you break off. If it didn't open it up all the way, just take a blade and cut the tip off a little bit. And then we're just going to put a little bit on the threads here. And that's more than enough. All right, I'm using a medium length extension attached to my 12mm socket, and then just screw the sucker in like so. The way the bump stop is formed, it really only goes on one way, and that's with the contour cutout perpendicular to the axle housing. So when it comes down and hits the axle is going to come into this curved out area of the bump stop. I just cinched it up with my 3/8 ratchet. There's a reason behind getting it tight enough but not too tight. What you want to do is just snug this thing up to where it's not going to be able to be turned easily with your hand and then call it good. You could over tighten this, so just don't keep cranking it because the bolt sleeve is captured in rubber, so you could just keep going and going and going. So just get it tight enough to where this thing isn't going to turn on you and call it good. This might twist on you, so you might have to use one hand to hold the bump stop still while you tighten the bolt. And don't forget to use the blue Loctite, because then that's going to prevent the bolt being able to back itself out and fall out, and then you lose your bump stop somewhere on the trail, which wouldn't be a good thing. We've got the rear bump stops on. Now let's show you how to get the front ones on. Now we're working on the front. The way we have it set up is we jacked up the front end. We have the frame supported with a 6-ton jack stand, and we took the wheel off. The reason why you want to jack it up and take the wheel off is to allow the lower control arm to droop a bit, to where it gives you more room to get the Durobump front bump stop in place, and it just gives you an easier access. With the tire in the way, you're going to be having a hard time getting the tool in there to loosen it and getting the new one in and tightening it. The instructions show to use a channel locks to spin off the bump stop. This is a fairly large thing to take off, so it takes a large set of channel locks. Now, if you don't have one of these in your tool arsenal, there's another option that I can see that will work. Most people that own homes or rent or whatever, they own a pipe wrench, because you use a pipe wrench for a lot of different things, for plumbing and different applications. Most pipe wrenches are going to have jaws that open up pretty wide, and then you can get on that bump stop with the pipe wrench instead. So there's another option if you don't have a large enough channel locks to spin off the old bump stop. This OEM bump stop is on there pretty tight, so you're going to have to use your muscles to turn this sucker. It seems once you get it turning just a little bit, then it eases up. Now that this is loose, I could spin it off with my hand. And there's the OEM rear bump stop on the lower control arm. The instructions say now you want to clean this up. Sean's got some dirt built up here, tiny bit of surface rust, and you might be one of those guys with a lot of rust if you live in the salt belts of the country, so you might be scraping and again maybe doing a little painting to prep it before you put the bump stop on. I'm going to be careful. I'm going to try to brush this dirt off and not push it into the threads of the hole. That's something to think about when you're cleaning it up. Try not to get debris in the threads. And then you could use your cleaner of choice, brake cleaner, whatever. Spray it on there, wipe it down really good. Here's the front bump stop kit unpackaged. You've got your 2 bump stops. You've got the bolts, which are just like for the rear. They're a grade 10.9 metric bolt. And just like the rears, it's a nice normal size. These are a 14 millimeter, not a weird size like a 13. And then they provide some more blue Loctite so you can Loctite the bolts. They build in a notch in the rubber, and this is an indicator so you get the bump stop in the proper orientation. This notch is supposed to face the wheel. And you can see that there's a slant. As the bump stop comes up to contact the frame, that's the reason why it's angled like that, to where it's ergonomically gonna hit the frame, as opposed to if this was completely flat. So they built a slant into it. Just like the rear, you grab your bolt, you slide it in through the top, and then you want to put some blue Loctite on the threads. That should be plenty. Okay, so we're gonna get this on the rear of the control arm. Notice we are putting this bump stop on the rear of the control arm, not the front. The instructions specifically say that you're supposed to put it on the rear, and that's what we're doing. Before we start snugging this thing up really tight and torquing it to spec, we want to make sure the notch is facing towards the wheel, which it is. And now we're going to grab our 14 millimeter socket and our torque wrench, and we're going to torque it to 25 foot-pounds. So here's my setup. I have a 3/8 ratchet with a short extension and a deep 14 millimeter socket. I'm coming in over the top of the sway bar, and I'm going to cinch this up. you'll most likely notice that this thing is going to start to spin on you a little bit. So it's good to keep one hand on it to kind of steady it while the bolt starts tightening up. All right, it's at 25 foot-pounds. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. You got a bolt for each bump stop. You unscrew the old one, you put the new one on with some Loctite, tighten it up to spec, and you're good to go. In the video description, we'll have a link to the Durobump website so you can purchase your own set. And as a special for Timmy the Toolman viewers and subscribers, hopefully you're subscribing, here's a promo code you can use to get a deal on a set of bump stops for the month of November. So don't wait. Get yourself a new set of bump stops quickly. Sean and I aren't going to blindly promote any product that comes our way. This guy Curtis that we met on T4R is a really cool guy. He's super knowledgeable, and all the feedback of his bump stops is really, really good. So that's why we're making a video of this product and sharing it with you, because we believe in the product and we're going to be running them on our own rigs. So we practice what we preach. We're going to be using these suckers because they are a definite upgrade over anything else out there on the market. With all that said, we thank you for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. We will be back with more videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you have any questions or comments, do that below. Take care. Bye-bye.